All right, so I think we're ready to go. Thanks for this nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernd. I'm from University of Innsbruck in Austria, and I'm very happy to speak to you today. I'm involved in customer experience research actually for more than 15 years now, and honestly, it's been fascinating to see how experiences have transformed the marketplace, but also how they have changed actually how we do market research. And today I would like to talk about the project we did together in the past 5 years with Christian and his Screver team, with Altorus Destinations, and with our practical lead partner, Meyerhofen-Hippach in the Tyrolean Zillertal, a very also renowned tourism destination in Austria. And it was a project that has been funded by the Federal State of Tyrol. So it was called a lighthouse project of digitization. Today I would like to talk about the topic of customer well-being in tourism. We tried to develop a so-called Feell-good-Index in this project, and I did this together with my colleagues Nicola Stockburger-Sauer and Janina Kunde from our department. So to start it off, I hope you feel good right now, because that's critical. What we see in the market is that well-being is one of the key priorities these days for many customers out there, actually for close to 90%. And this is not surprising, because we know from also academic research that well-being is a very strong purchasing driver, actually, particularly for Generation Y and Generation Z. So as a response, many service providers have begun to design service environments and also corporate touch points that fuel and foster such a state of well-being across their journeys. And this is especially the case, you can imagine, in tourism and hospitality, an industry that is inherently centered on creating well-being for customers, for guests. However, if we have a look on the current KPIs that are used to measure the performance of a destination, of a tourist destination, we still talk about more or less capacity-centric indicators such as arrival rates and overnight stays and things like that. Not so much about human-centric, emotional indicators that actually truly cater to the core promise of the industry, namely creating well-being. And if we have a look into current research, we also can clearly see that well-being is a key goal of transformative service marketing initiatives. It has been found to be a very important outcome also of customer journeys. The problem, however, is that if you consider that, actually in most customer journeys these days, you have so many interactions with companies, with other customers, measuring well-being at a specific touch point simply is not enough, because it will always deliver you only limited, very specific insights about a specific touch point, about the situation there, but it doesn't provide you with the big picture across the journey. And in fact, if we look to cognitive psychology, we also see that well-being changes across time quite significantly. We also see that the anticipated experience is simply not the same as the lived experience right now, in the here and now at the Soho in Zurich. And it also does not equal the remembered experience. I wrote a very nice paper with my dear colleague Larissa Becker last year in the Journal of Business Research on this topic. So what the goal was here in this project, to study how does actually customer well-being with a service experience develop and change across the customer journey. Also to find out whether it actually impacts downstream consequences, such as people's intention to talk positively about the destination experience, about the products they consumed. And a specific third goal from our practical partners was to develop a new KPI, a human-centric, emotional, well-being-centric KPI, the so-called Feell-good-Index, based on the data that we collected. So we did quite a bit in the last 5 years. On the one hand, we had, as you can see here, quite some qualitative projects. We talked to destination managers from the entire German-speaking area to simply understand how is performance measurement on a destination level done so far. What about data? What about digitization? What about digital technologies? We also talked to tourists to find out when, where, and how do they want to be, asked for feedback in their journey. What incentives, for instance, play, and what kind of role incentives play, and also whether digitization is something that is relevant. And we clearly got the, so to say, the outcome that they especially like short, quantitative, preferably single item or even pictorial surveys with open text fields where they can also, so to say, write us their qualitative comments. And this is exactly what we implemented in our quantitative studies. Here we did two approaches. On the one hand, we had a multi-season survey where we surveyed tourists for 3 consecutive seasons, and we monitored their well-being and their perception of the destination product. And then we also had a longitudinal study, a true within subjects design, where we more or less did the same, but the survey was much more encompassing. We also measured different experiential dimensions, how they evolve across time. We studied whether the efficiency of the customer journey design plays a role and things like that. For today, I would like to specifically direct your attention towards this multi-season study because I think there is something in for many of you. So we worked together here with Meyerhofen-Hippach in the Zillertal. The destination had implemented back in, I think, 2017 or 2018, the My Zillertal app. So together with Arturo's Destinations, also a Swiss-based company, they implemented this all-in-one travel companion, you could say. So it's basically an app where you can book all kinds of experiential offerings. At the moment we started, it had roughly 350,000 users. More than 300 experiences were bookable all year round. Clearly, the ski ticket was one of the best-selling experiences in winter, but you also could book, guided hiking tours, restaurant visits, paragliding trips, and things like that. So basically, it was this all-in-one travel companion. And we used this application actually as a, you could say, carrier system to send the users dedicated surveys at specific touchpoints. So coming to our targeting, we had 2 targeting approaches. On the one hand, we used this app system. So we used all the My Zillertal app users, and we sent them time-triggered invitations to our survey, which was kept quite simple and straightforward, but more to that later on. They either received push notifications, if enabled, or they had an invitation via email in German or English, depending on their preferences. But then we also wanted to increase the targeting. And this, I think, nicely resonates also with many of the presentations we heard yesterday from the pharma industry, to also target those users that simply did not use the app so far. So we used web banners on the different booking portals and on the destination's website. And we use QR codes in the destinations, in the gondolas, in the buses, at the bus stops, simply to increase participation also via these touchpoints. We had 3 measurement waves. We had the pre-consumption wave, the consumption wave, then in the destination, and the post-consumption wave. Now, the formatting is not fully accurate here, but I think you can follow it. The app users got the invitation to participate in our survey for the very first time 1 hour after booking the experience. Then again, 4 hours after completion. For instance, if the ski day had ended at 4 o'clock, they got the invitation to participate around 8 to 9 o'clock in the evening. And then we had the post-consumption stage where they got, again, an invitation 4 weeks later to their experiential product that they consumed. The QR and web users, of course, they had self-select the journey stage where they are in. So they had to indicate I'm before stay in the Zillertal or already back at home again. And this was then nicely redirected with the flow logic that we heard before to the specific survey. Design-wise, this was a multi-season study that I said already before. We had 3 consecutive seasons where we, so to say, sent out our surveys to our respondents, winter 22, summer 23, and winter 23-24 again. And quite frankly, initially, we wanted to do this as a within subjects design. So basically to interview the same participants multiple times, well, ideally 3 times. But we've already seen in our pre-studies that on such a large scale level, and we've also seen that in our qualitative studies, people are not ready to fill out surveys multiple times, especially not when they're on vacation. So we ended up, I think you can follow that here, we ended up with a between subject study where we still can compare the different waves with each other and where we still can do all kinds of regression models and all that stuff, but it does not allow for intra-individual comparisons. This is what we did then in our 4th study, as I showed you before, but with a much smaller sample. Coming to our sample, we overall targeted roughly 2,000 respondents across those 3 seasons. And if you look at the channels, you immediately see push performed very, very bad. And there is a very simple answer for that. It took us some time to figure that out. out of those roughly 350,000 users, only 10 to 15% are actually active. So they come to the Zillertal, they book something in the app. Again, out of those 10 to 15%, only a very small fraction give the consent to be reachable for marketing purposes, for surveys and all that stuff. And again, if you think of yourself, how many apps do you allow to send you push notifications? Not so many. And this is where you end up. So we initially wanted to start just with push, and we saw already in our pre-studies that's not sufficient. So we expanded that to email. Email worked out quite well, and especially QR and web worked very well, which is also, I think, a good sign to destinations that did not invest in such an app already and could do a pretty similar study across multiple seasons with a, I would say, moderate communication budget. In terms of age, that was also interesting. We had a mean age of 46 years. So I would say this is quite old. It was also predominantly male. So we've seen that especially men between 45 and 60, they are the ones that participate in these kinds of surveys. Not so much Gen Y and Gen Z customers. We also had them in our sample, robust and still large enough, but that was a bit surprising. And we talked about response already this morning. We could achieve for the app survey, and this is the only one where we can create an accurate response rate. We could achieve a response rate of roughly 1.7%, which is not so bad, I would say, overall. What did we ask them? Well, the survey was kept fairly simple, predominantly single items, predominantly pictorial skills. And I would like to direct your attention to these two items specifically. We had here on the one hand the effective slider from Betella and Verschure, applied before in cognitive psychology, not so much in a marketing context, which basically asks you on a scale from -50 to +50, anchored by those two emoticons, how do you feel at the moment? And then there pops up this open text field. Tell us why you're feeling this way right now. And I can tell you more than 50% of our respondents actually also used this open text field. And then we also had, how do you like the Zillertal? 5 stars, adapted from Horton et al. 2010. They also used it previously. It's basically the attitude towards the destination. You could also say it's a customer-centric performance assessment. And I will come back to those two items just in a minute. What else did we ask? What have you experienced? Ski and board, outdoor, wellness, culinary, and many, many more. We had to do this because the CRM data was not available for our web and QR users. How long are you staying? Where are you staying? Or when are you staying there, the month? And then we had 2 dependent variables, NPS and intention to return, together with age and gender. So, of course, from an academic standpoint, we would have loved to include more items. But as always in such large projects, you have to find a compromise somewhere, and this was the compromise. This was the survey for T1. In T0 and in T2, we had similar surveys, but of course, here we asked them, if you think of your stay in the Zillertal, how do you feel right now? So, of course, it always has been a setting-specific form of consumer well-being and not a subjective form of life well-being, then you would be in a completely different also domain of research. Yes, and we took basically those 2 items here across 3 measurement waves. And if you put them together, you can nicely calculate an index here ranging from 0 to 100 that, so to say, in the end shows you how well customers feel in a destination across the entire journey, and also includes their attitude or performance assessment towards the destination. So as you can see here, Zillertal already I would say performs quite well, but this value only tells you more if you compare it to other destinations or other destination products, which is not the case yet. So I invite you to zoom in a bit into our data and have a look on how this actually evolved across the journey. And now it gets interesting, because what you see here actually is that there is a significant difference between customers' FGI perceptions before and after their stay and what they experience at the spot. Especially the experience in the Zillertal was significantly worse than what happened before and afterwards. Now, from a theoretical standpoint, there are many explanations for that, and for us, I can tell you it was not very surprising. If you think of cognitive load, for instance, people are simply overwhelmed by all kinds of sensory inputs in the destination. Many people also reported that they were physiologically exhausted, especially after doing sports all the day, which is a stark contrast to their everyday stimulation in an office environment, for instance. We have memory biases involved. We talked yesterday already a bit about memory biases, also here. Rosy prospection, rosy retrospection, optimism biases, especially also event segmentation, peak-end rule. Many explanations are there for this, you could say, V-shape or U-shape pattern. Yeah? And this pattern, if you look at the blue line, was much stronger in winter as compared here to summer. In summer, we had a flatter profile. This might also have to do with the product as such, which is a bit different. The target group also is a bit different. So this might have played a role here. And we find these differences actually also through different experience categories. Yeah? We find it to be a bit stronger, especially for the ski and board, for their core products, for events, yeah? Not so much for party and culinary offerings. So here we have a bit of a smaller gap. We also find, and that's interesting, that the FGI across the season differs. We find that especially the FGI scores in the destination are much more positive at the end of the season. This, for instance, summer, main study 2, we find much more positive scores, and you could say even a very small gap only in August and September, whereas the gap is still quite big in June and July. And we also found quite interesting differences between generations. So especially here, the blue line, the light green line, the generation Z, they performed quite well in all 3 waves. So they are the ones that really felt very, very well and also assessed the entire offering very positive. For the generation Y, the expectation performance gap was perhaps the closest one for all generations. Generation X, those are the ones that are a bit more critical at the spot. And then we have the boomers here, the dark green line. Those are the ones that cannot profit so much from their vacation. So they are a bit less positive than all their other generational counterparts through a post-consumption stage. And what we did in the end, we also did, of course, some regression models to see whether this newly developed FGI indicator also significantly predicts people's word of mouth towards the destination. And as you see with here, the bold values and the asterisks, we found significant effects in all main studies and also across all measurement waves. We included in T1 at the spot 2 additional very important variables. On the one hand, we had crowding. In our pre-studies, we already saw also in the qualitative interviews, many managers and also tourists mentioned that crowding could play a role here. So we worked together with the cable car operators and we included the skier days and matched it with the time the survey has been filled out. But as you can see here, we could not find a significant effect. We also included weather data. Also, this was a very sensitive topic. Many people said, well, did you also control for weather? Well, we tried. We collaborated with Geosphere Austria, and we had here the rain hours, the sunshine hours, temperature, snow height for winter, and rain amount, rain precipitation volume for summer. And you can see as well, we couldn't find here significant effects either across all 3 main studies. So weather and crowding did not play the role. The FGI, however, has been a solid predictor in all 3 measurement waves and across all 3 studies. You see even that the effect here on customers' word of mouth is even stronger in post-consumption for winter. In summer, it's a bit different. In summer, we find the strongest effects during the lived experience, so in the destination. So what does that mean now? Oh, I'm sorry again for the format. I think we found that the FGI can indeed serve as a solid new KPI to come up with an emotional-based well-being assessment of service experiences across the journey. We also found that there is this U-shape. Pre- and post-stages perform significantly better than customers' experience at the spot. We found differences also between seasons, between months, between different types of activities. And we also found that it is a strong driver of customers' word of mouth. The implications for theory, I think, are quite clear. We could confirm the discrepancies that have also been mentioned by previous studies, both in marketing and psychology. We also could confirm that actually static measures, especially if you think of our U-shape or V-shape, actually fall short. They just deliver limited insights in the end. And what is, I think, a particularly relevant and nice contribution here, we found that especially pictorial scales, single item scales, with short digital surveys work very, very well for this purpose in this industry. For the destination itself, it clearly means that they should identify the causes why there is such a U-shape, especially in specific months, for specific activities. They already did that. Tailor the customer journey design to many contextual factors that you should also include into your data. We talked about magic before. I would say here, depending on our results, you could say the magic in the end lies in the personalization that you do based on the data you obtain. And a clear goal for the destination is a continuous monitoring of customers' well-being, in this case, using the FGI for a continuous measurement to see, in an ideal case, as we've seen before in the live dashboard, how people are doing at the moment, how they are feeling at the moment, where are the pain points, where are the gain points, where are, for instance, also the geographical regions in the destination, or potentially even the products and services that perform well, where are the ones that are not performing so well for specific target groups. Of course, this was just one study in one specific industry, in one context. We are very much looking forward to expanding this approach and rolling it also out in different industries, because I think that the well-being measurement is definitely something you should have an eye on. Thank you so much for now, and I'm looking forward to your feedback. Thank you.